Very good afternoon, all the participants present over here. Welcome to the 5-day faculty development program on recent developments in the field of computational biology. So today we have our speaker with us, that is having the name Dr. Sumit Kumar Singh. So now I would like to introduce him. Dr. Sumit Kumar Singh is an assistant professor in the School of Biochemical Engineering at the Indian Institute of Technology, BHU, Varanasi. Before joining IIT BHU, he worked as a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Delaware and obtained his PhD in chemical engineering from IIT Delhi. His areas of interest principally encompass a broad domain of therapeutic protein characterization. The current research endeavors of his group are focused on developing platform approaches by proteomic and glycomic profiling methods to understand pathobiology of dengue virus, development of a universal flu vaccine, and developing approaches for generating predefined glycans in monoclonal antibodies for the therapeutic applications. The research embodies a twofold approach. First, the identification of biomarkers that are specific to a particular disease state, and then utilization of the chosen biomarkers to develop therapeutics using data-driven protein engineering approaches. Dr. Sumit Kumar Singh has authored 20 publications and several presentations in the area of analytical characterization and development of safe and efficacious protein-based therapeutics. He has also been a recipient of several awards at various conferences, including the Young Scientist in Bioprocessing Award and at the 6th Bioprocessing India Conference and a Research Excellence Award by IIT Delhi. He also serves as a reviewer of several journals, including Journal of Chromatography B, Biotechnology Progress, Bioanalysis, and Engineering in Life Sciences. Now I would like to request Dr. Sumit Kumar Singh to take over the session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Ghosh, for that generous introduction. And am I audible to everyone, right?
Yes, you're audible, sir.
Okay. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me into this faculty development program. And it's a great pleasure to be with you all today. Just before I begin the formal presentation on my topic, I would like to just introduce my department and institute. So currently I am an assistant professor in the School of Biochemical Engineering at IIT BHU. So this institute is located in Varanasi in Uttar Pradesh. The institute is a very unique IIT in the terms that this IIT has a coexistence of a very prestigious medical school, and we have a very vibrant technological departments, all encompassing major areas of science and technology, including environmental sciences, biomedical engineering. And this is very unique in terms of IIT to have all these streams together, and it facilitates us to have an interdisciplinary kind of interdisciplinary kind of work here. So that is the introduction about my institute and department. The work that I do, which Professor Ghosh very well introduced to all of you, is basically on development of therapeutic drugs for various disease targets. So in generating, and the way we do is we use various multi-omic technologies that, which help us to understand or identify various biomarkers for those particular disease. And using those biomarkers, we try to understand what are the mechanisms of disease, and based on that, we engineer the protein therapeutics, to proteins to develop their therapeutic for our use. So this from this, introduction, you might have been wondering that I'm not a computational biologist, which I want to confess to all of you. So I'm a chemical engineer by training, and I was a bit hesitant in taking up this thing because this is not the core area of my work, but I do a lot of data analysis for my work, because all the OMIC technology generally generate a vast amount of data. We have voluminous data, and identifying the information from the data is one of the key aspects to get to achieve the objectives of our study. So with that, what I'm going to discuss today is multivariate data analysis for biotech processes. So we'll be discussing some concepts of it and some case studies of the applications of multivariate data analysis for biotech processes. Basically, the outline is very simple. I have the first part of my talk, I'll be talking about the basic concepts of what multivariate data analysis is, some cherry-picked, techniques of multivariate data analysis, which we routinely use in our applications. So this does not encompass all the tools that are there in the multivariate data analysis, but some cherry-picked techniques I will be discussing. And then we'll discuss a case study of application of those techniques to our biotech processes, and finally we'll have acknowledgement of course. So the MVDA. So the first question would be like, what is an MVDA? Does anyone know what MVDA stands for? And it will be good if I know the composition of the participants today, Professor Ghosh, if that is possible for you to tell me. So that way I'll be able to, kind of mold my talk like that.
I am requesting the participants to, if you have any opinion regarding the term MVDA that the Dr. Sumit Kumar Singh is actually saying.
So is it okay to have a participatory kind of talk, right? It's not.
Yes, no problem. Yes,
okay,
you
yeah,
can.
Yeah.
That will be more interactive.
Yeah. So anyone familiar with the terminology MVDA? Have you ever used any multivariate data analytical tool in your research? No. So okay, that's fine. So I'm just curious to know. I'm sure that many of you would have used it, but probably might not be exactly familiar with the exact the terminology of this thing. So basically, to understand MVDA, first we should know that we can appreciate this fact that we all do a lot of measurements every day. As a scientist or as someone who is working in industry, in R&D section, or even in the manufacturing sector also, we make measurements on number of things, like for various ensembles of chemicals, entities, or any biological systems you're working on. We make various measurements, and these measurements generally, in at least for the biotech processes, it could be using various spectroscopic tools. So spectroscopic tools includes techniques like near infrared spectroscopy, fluorescence spectroscopy, Raman spectroscopy, or circular dichroism, etc., which gives various information in terms of composition of any chemical entities, or the structure of biological protein, biological entities, etc. So and all this data, they are very it's not one or two data points that we get. You'll get a lot of data points when you acquire this data, and within the data acquisition times is of the order of like 5 minutes or 10 minutes, like that. And in 5 or 10 minutes you get voluminous data. Similarly, in bioprocess, we make use of, we do measurements using chromatographic techniques. So there is a liquid chromatography, that are hyphenated with mass spectrometry based techniques, that gives you idea about differential expression of various proteins, metabolites, even identification of various biomarkers are done using LCMS and GCMS techniques. Similarly, other examples could be as simple as measuring temperature of any particular process, measuring pressure, flow rate, viscosity, or concentrations, etc. So the idea is, if you take into account all of these measurements, what you're trying to, at the end of the measurement, what you're getting is, a large amount of data. So you can imagine the condition of this particular person who is working, and he has done any of these measurements or a combination of these measurements, and he has a whole volume of data. Now the data does not mean information, right? Data is equal to information. Data, most of the data because any measurement will entail some kind of noise in it. So it is very important that you differentiate your signal that is, which is of your interest, from the noise that are there in that particular measurement, because noise will not help you to understand your process, or does not help you to make any corrective measures if there are so many deviations in the process, right? So the first thing that we should realize is that merely collecting the data is not getting the information. So in order to extract the information, from the data, we use this MVDA technique. So MVDA stands for multivariate data analysis, and it is just the science of extracting the relevant information from the whole, voluminous or bulk of data or chunk of data that we have, with the use of mathematical or statistical procedures. So I think that is that concept of MVDA, what it does, it's quite clear to all of you, right? So the application areas of MVDA, the MVDA can be applied in any of areas you can imagine. And just in case of, for bioprocess applications, MVDA is basically applied to do process monitoring. So are the audience from the bioprocess engineering background, or they are just computer science people?
Mostly they are from computer science background, but
okay, so
some professors are there who are also from other backgrounds.
Okay. All right. So because I am from a bioprocess engineering field, as I said that I, not very much comfortable with the computer science terminologies and those things. So I will be using more of these terminologies that are pertaining from bioprocess field. So please bear with me on that. So in case you have any doubt or you do not understand any term, you just feel free to interrupt in between. So the MVDA, applications of MVDA, like I said, it can be applied in as many areas as you can think of, where you have, obtained large amount of data. And so the question would be like, what would define what is large or what is large data, right? So we'll discuss that for what kind of data the MVDA tools are more suitable for application. So generally, the MVDA, at least in bioprocess industry, it can be used for process monitoring. For example, there is a process where we are trying to develop an antibody for COVID vaccine. We are developing COVID vaccine. So it has a certain unit operation that has to be undertaken to produce that vaccine, right? So we can use MVDA tools to do process monitoring. And if in the process, if you're observing any kind of deviations in the process, you can identify those deviations and do corrective measurements or corrective actions so as to rectify that particular issue and get your target product of interest. Similarly, there is another important emerging area in bioprocessing, which is called process analytical technology. And this is a very, most of these therapeutic drug developers, they are more keen on to adopt this technology into their manufacturing, pipelines, because the regulators who are responsible for giving the approval for the commercialization or marketing of your drug, they say that under the current paradigm, they are more interested in actually building the quality of the product in the process itself, rather than building the quality by testing. So earlier in the conventional procedure of manufacturing, what was the technique was the drug was produced for a particular batch, or any particular chemical or any protein is being produced, or anything which is produced using a chemical process or biochemical process. What will happen is the after the completion of batch, the product will be taken and it will be tested for quality. But nowadays, what the regulators are saying is that rather than doing that, in that case, what will happen if at the end of the batch, if the quality does not meet the criteria for acceptance criteria, the batch will be discarded, and again you have to continue from starting point. But in process analytical technology paradigm, what people are saying is you have to make intermittent measurements during the process itself, and those measurements should be such that it should give you the idea about the quality of the product during process itself, so that at the end, when you get the product after the end of the batch, you will be able to ensure that the quality of the product is maintained, right? Rather than you have to discard by testing at the end of the process. So that is process analytical technology, and which is very much in use in bioprocess industry. And in this area, what the application of MVD is, because there is a concept of analysis time and decision time. So suppose a particular product is being produced in a process, and you have to take a decision as a person who's working on that process, so as to transfer that particular product from one unit operation to another. And suppose you have a decision time window of about 30 minutes, but in order to ensure whether you have the quality of the product in the upstream process verified, the analysis time is taking like maybe 40 minutes. In that case, you will not be able to adopt a process analytical technology, because your analysis time is much more than your decision time window. So in those cases, what will happen is that the MVDA models are being built on the data that will help us to speed up things, and it will help you to take that decision within the decision time window, so as to enable as an enabler for PAT tools. Similarly, there are various other applications like composition property and a relationship that one can determine, structure activity relationship, because generally at least for the proteins, the sequence determines the final fold that protein will take. So although there have been a lot of work that is there to establish the structures, sequence structure relationship, but we do not have exact mechanism of how proteins fold, or what fold the protein will take from just the sequence information. So in those cases also, various analytical tools are used to get those kind of relationship, and that also MVDA plays a great role. So similarly, quality control applications are also there. Image analysis also are one of the key applications of MVDA in case of bioprocess application, and there are many more like that. I hope it is clear to all of you. I don't know whether it's clear or not.
Yes, sir, it's okay.
Okay. So if you think about the basic type of questions that can be answered using this MVDA technology, so basically it could be like 3 different kind of scenarios, or 3 types of data analytical questions that one can answer with MVDA. The starting could be as simple as you do not know anything about the what kind of process about process, but what kind impact of that process on your product, you don't know anything, and you have got a huge amount of data. So what you do with that data, you should you just want to get an overview of the data, right? So how does the data look like, and what are the basic what are the trends in that data? Is there outliers in data or not, something like that? So one thing that is as simple as just getting the overview of the data, that is a basic question that you can answer using MVDA tool. The second is once you have like overview of data, sometimes the resolution between 2 different data points may not be very high. So in those cases, in order to enhance the resolution and to fine tune your understanding of the process, you may need to do some sort of classification. The classification means you may have certain defined classification models to which you would like your new observations to fall into. So basically categorization of any particular observation into a predefined class, such kind of classification also you can do with with the MBDA tool. The third thing is the regression modeling. So suppose you have like a process and there are a lot of input variables that go into that process, right? For example, in a chemical industry, you have pH, you have gas flow rate, you have pressure, and all those things are input variables where the product quality, the titer, the yield of the product, they're all the output of the product. So you may need to want to establish a relationship or get some quantitative idea of how this input variables impact the output of the process. So such kind of things can be done using regression modeling between two blocks of data. That's one block is the input variables and other by is the output block. And generally, for MVDA, we basically arrange the data in form of something like this. We put it in a data matrix where we have an observation, and then we have certain variables that define those observations separately. So that is how you arrange the data matrix in MVDA. So for the data overview, the technique that is generally used is called principal component analysis, and we use extensively in our research this particular tool. So what PCA does is it provides summary of, like, because we are looking at the overview of the data, it provides the summary of how observations are related, and with that we can also know whether any particular observation or any particular measurement is going out of out of defined limits, or are there any outliers in the data. It can also help us to understand the relationship in variables. Now, which set of variables are able to are contributing to maximum variability in the process. So or conversely, which particular variables are contributing less to the to the overall variability of the process. Such kind of relationship we can get using principal component analysis. And just principal component analysis works only on the single data block, right? Or maybe like observations that you may have, like you do not get any quantitative relationship among variables, but you get just an overview of the data. So just an example of PCA component analysis, the food habits of people in different countries in Europe. As you could see, we'll discuss how this plots are generated. Like this is called, the one on the left is called a score plot. Sorry, why it's not. Is there any restriction in terms of using any pen on this presentation?
No, there is no restriction, sir. You can use.
Somehow it's not. So anyway, I just wondered why. Don't know, it's not working somehow. So idea is, so the one on this left is called the score plot, and the one on the right is called loading plots. We'll discuss what is score and what is loading plots. So generally, score plot is basically the summary of all the observations that you have, and the loading is basically the summary of all the variables or the relationship between variables in the data set. So the score plot, as you could see, the different countries are being shown here, and in the loading plots you have the various food, the different kind of food that different people eat. So when you perform the principal component analysis, you get data something like this. So if you see here, the different countries, for example, these Nordic countries, like Sweden, Denmark, Finland, they are being clustered into one particular. And if you, why they are being clustered together can be, the answer to that can be obtained from the loading plot, where you get, most of the residents of Sweden, Denmark, Norway, they basically obtain food from the, frozen, they mostly consume frozen vegetables, fish, crisp breads, etc. Similarly, if you see, the residents of Portugal, Italy, or Spain, they are more or less they consume olive oil, garlic. So basically, the idea is that this kind of data set, when you do PC on this, you can basically, the kind of data set that will be the countries along the observation, and all these variables like what amount of garlic acid, garlic, olive oil, or this frozen vegetables that are taken along the variable columns. So when you perform PCA on this, you get plot something like this, and this plot basically help you to get more information. So from the data to information, I think that is something I wanted to all of you to appreciate here about that. So just to make things more clear, so this is basically a plot where you have two different variables which is being measured. Like I said, during process analytical technology, if you're adopting in your manufacturing, you will be taking intermittent measurements continuously, right? For a given variable. So here are two variables, and you're taking continuous measurements. And looking at this plot, what one can say is that both the process, the process is working perfectly fine, because both the variables of this process, they are well within the defined limits. So which is marked as like plus or minus 3 standard deviation. So they are not going outside that. But when we, so this is just the plot of how this variable 1 or variable 2 changes as a function of time. But if you do a correlation pattern by doing that PC analysis, what you could see here is that two data points which are highlighted here, which were within the plus or minus 3 standard deviation, and therefore the process, we thought that it is perfectly fine. They are now can be easily seen that they are an outliers. So basically, if you're doing a process monitoring using such plots, or using this univariate analysis, you will never be able to identify that these two variables are actually outliers. And since they're outliers, you will not be able to do a corrective action on your process. So therefore, the outlier information, generally, they are more easily obtained from the correlation patterns, which are basically obtained using the principal component analysis, which is kind of MVDA tool. Is this okay, clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
So I'll encourage people to participate and ask questions, because otherwise, because one thing is that I'm not from computer science background, and probably that's why it may not be everything. All this terminologies and all things may not be familiar to you guys. So I'll try to make it as simple as possible. So I'll encourage everyone to please participate and ask questions in between if you have any. Shall I continue, or are there any questions?
Yes, sir. Please continue, sir.
Okay. So like the second kind of application for MVDA is basically, as we discussed, was in care for the classification and discrimination, right? So suppose this is data from metal industry, where different metals are used to develop an alloy. And if you could see on the score plot, which is basically different elements that are used to make the alloy, and on the loading plot you have the various dimensions of this the input or the various properties, like the width or the length of the different input parameters to make this particular alloy. So you could see that there are two distinct clusters. So in the first cluster, it is just one some data point which is indicated by this selenium metal, and another one, there are two different metals which are basically overlapping with each other. So distinction, if you want to make a distinction between selenium and other two, it is very easy. But simply with this PCA, if you're able, but the resolution here is very less. So if you want to enhance the resolution and kind of categorize in different classification into three different categories for the three different input metals, you have to do PCA on this this particular subset of data. So potentially it may or it may not enhance the resolution, but more likely if you do rather than doing the whole data principal component analysis, if you select a subset of data and perform the PCA on that, you may enhance the resolution, and that may help you, to build classification models. And any other new variables or new observation that are added to the data set, if you have trained your model well, they can be put together in the different classification models. And that way you will be able to do a real-time monitoring of the impact of various changes in the process to overall output that you're going to get. The final is the third type of question that we discussed was the regression modeling, where we want to get some quantitative idea of relationship between input and output variables. So PLS, this kind of the tool that we generally use is not PCA, but use this PLS, is called partial least square regression. And generally this kind of this technique can help you to establish the relationship between input and output variables. For example, this may be very relevant, at least in bioprocess industry, very much, because for example, there are certain quality attributes of a product. In protein, the protein generally, if you are developing a drug which is a protein based, generally the protein based drug is not merely the protein. And biochemically, it is not just the protein. There will be some sort of sugars, lipids, molecules that will be expressed on that particular protein. And getting the continuous data for those sugars or lipids on the protein molecules is analytically very challenging. Computationally, it may be okay, but analytically, if you want to get real-time data of different composition or the diversity of sugars that is attached on a protein, that is very difficult. And generally, you will get so many data about the process, but you'll not get so many data about the quality of the product. So in those cases, establishing, having a model that establishes the relationship basically helps you to get more information about how the input process is helping or impacting output process, with even acquiring less amount of data, which is basically very challenging and expensive in that case. So this kind of analysis is used to establish those kind of relationship between two blocks of data, X and Y. So is there any questions on the applications of MVDA, like what kind of questions that we can ask with MVDA? No?
Till now, there is no question.
Okay. So, okay. So so I just like to get into some details of, like, we looked at what PCA is, what it can do. We also saw that there's something called score plot. There's something called loading plot that help you to diagnose various attributes of the process, help you to identify outliers, help you establish relationship between variables, etc. But we'll just get into some theory of what principal component analysis is. So suppose you have a set of data, any one of you have set of measurements on any of your process. What kind of analysis would you generally or normally perform in those data? Just a open question to the audience. Okay.
One of the audiences has responded.
Yeah, network
Uh,
analysis.
yes, yes,
No,
yes.
I'm just I just want asking just about the basic level. Suppose you have like I have a data of anything, like for example, we have data of about 100 people's height and weight. So what kind of analysis generally we'll go about doing in those kind of data?
Can we sorting the data?
Okay, we could sort the data. Other than that, any so we just have the random numbers there, right? So in order to make sense of that data, generally what parameters would you say use or obtain? We might want to get the mean of the data set, right? Average, yeah, your average. I think Dr. Saha responded average. Yeah, we will try to get average of the data.
Or
Standard
median
data.
can be done, median.
Yeah. So all of this are statistical methods that will help you to get some sense of what data is, rather than just having you know, sum of points in the form of you know, various measurements. You with this you know, parameters, you will be able to get sense of some of the data. So basically, in order to understand the principal component analysis, the basic understanding that one need to have is, you know, about the standard deviation, variance, covariance, some knowledge about the matrix algebra, and in that, like how to determine eigenvectors and eigenvalues. Do we are everyone aware or you know, acquainted with basic understanding of these terms? I hope, yeah.
Yes, sir, I think so.
Yeah. So basically, like we said, like you know, the first thing that like Dr. Saha said, that he would look for an average of data set, right? But suppose you have some data set. I just wanted, you know, to I just wanted to write this, but somehow this is. Can I stop sharing for a moment and reopen it? Perhaps then I will be able to write it.
Yes, sir, you can do it. No problem.
Sorry about that. Is it visible now? The slides are visible. I'm on
Yes,
slide
yes.
number 11. Yeah.
It's
So
visible.
yeah, I think I could.
It's
you
working.
yeah. So basically, whenever you start with something average, right? If you average is a very basic measurement, basic parameter that one used to get some information about the data. But with the average, you know, the drawback of getting an average of a data is that it will just essentially, in physical meaning, is that you will get the middle point of the measurement that you are taken, right? That is what the average will give you. So suppose you have like two sets of data like this, like this is the two data point that you have. So if I take the average of these two data sets, the average turns out to be 10, right? So but if you look at these two data sets, one thing that is very clear is that those two data sets are very different from each other, right? Even though both of them have average 10. And in what respect can you think of like they are different from each other? So the idea is like these are two separate data that have been collected, and if I took the average of these two data sets, the average I got was like 10. But simply looking at this data, it is very clear that they are very different from each other. In what respect they are very different from each other? The spread of the data. Does it make sense? Yeah. The spread, right? That is range that you're saying. So the spread is very, and the parameter that gives you idea about the spread in data is basically standard deviation. So generally for, if you take the standard deviation of this two data set, generally standard deviation is calculated using this formula where, standard deviation is the summation. You take each data point, subtract the mean from each data point, square it, and sum for all the data in that particular dimension, divided by the number of observation minus 1. Why n minus 1? Do you know why n minus 1? Suppose at which scenario we'll use n minus 1? Why not n? So the idea is whenever you're the data that you're taking, it could be from the entire population, right? If you have like 100 people and you recorded data for all the 100 people for a particular purpose, then you have taken the data for entire population. In that case, if you're calculating standard deviation, you will only use n, right? But if you have taken subset of the data from that population and not the entire population, and using that subset, you're kind of projecting what would be the case for the entire population, then the denominator will be n minus 1. So I think that is very important to make that distinction. So from the data collection is also very important parameter in terms of when you do the analysis. So that is the point that I wanted to highlight with that. So when you calculate the standard deviation, if you calculate standard deviation, generally I think the standard deviation for this thing is like about 1.8 or 1.9, and for this one it is about 8.3 or something. So it clearly shows that, because if you see here, the mean is 10, right? So all the data points are spread out from the mean. It's not, the spread is not very this will be, for this one it will be 8.3, and this one it will be like 1.2 or 8, something like that. So you can check that, what is that. So for this particular case, from the mean you have a very wide spread of the data, from like you have a range of, even the maximum range is 20, and it is very far apart from the mean, right? Whereas in this case, most of the data values, they are very close together. So basically with the average, you are not able to distinguish between two data sets, but with standard deviation you are able to distinguish that the spread is different. So another thing, another way of doing the or assessing the spread in data is using the concept called variance. Any guesses of what variance would be? Variance in a data set? Because I said variance and standard deviation are related to each other. So how would like variance, what relationship do you see between variance and a standard deviation? expectation of squared deviation of a random. Yeah. So just it is the squared standard deviation, right? That is the variance. So spread and variance, standard deviation and variance, they are basically the same. They provide similar, information about the spread of the data. So, and generally, more generally, people use standard deviation as the more used parameter for understanding the spread in the data. But why I introduce variances, so that we can understand something about covariance. Now, can you, comment something about what kind of data do we use standard deviation and variance to understand the spread of the data? Like what the characteristic of data should be for us to apply standard deviation or variance to characterize that particular data? No guesses? Dr. Saha? Yeah, the data is experimental. Yeah, that is sure. But the characteristic of data, that's what I was looking for. Like in terms of dimensions, can you say like on what kind of what should be the dimensions of data on which standard deviation and variance can be applied, can be calculated? Like it should be one dimension, right? Suppose you have like a data set where you have height and weight of the people. Will you be able to calculate standard deviation for the two dimension, that height and weight correlated with each other? You can calculate standard deviation independent of height, independent of standard deviation of the weight data, right? So generally the standard deviation and variance data can be generally is applied on one-dimensional data. So, but when we say that multivariate data analysis and one-dimensional data, or like if we have like a single variable or two variables or three variables, it is easy for us to do plot on an Excel sheet and visualize how the data would look like, right? But suppose you have like more than 5 variables. Is it a way that you can plot it on an Excel sheet or any of your MATLAB program to get a visual picture of how data looks like? Because all thing you can do is like you can go up to like 3 dimensions like on a paper, right? Or maybe like 4 dimensions. But suppose the dimensions are more than that, you will not be able to visualize them on a on a piece of paper. So in order for them to visualize, what you need to do is you need to reduce the dimensions of the data without losing the information, and that is what PCA does for us. But to get that, the closest parameter like standard deviation variances, the covariance. So covariance is just nothing but it is also estimating the spread in the data, but it is not operating on one-dimensional data. It will operate on more than two-dimensional data set, right? And those dimensions of data set are not independent of each other. You're not identifying the spread in the data in one dimension independent of the other. You're correlating both of them, you see with respect to one another. Is it clear, this one? So so that is covariance. So basically if you look at how covariance is calculated, it is nothing but if you look at the standard deviation. So if you see the variance formula is nothing but it is the squared of the standard deviation, right? So if you expand this term, sorry, if you expand this term, like this particular term, it will be like xi minus x bar into xi minus x bar, right? So basically, if it's just the variance, you are getting variance along only one dimension. But suppose you replace this xi with say yi, which is in another dimension, and this with y bar, you get basically covariance of along xy directions. It is very same formula as the variance. Whatever you get for variance is very just replacing xi with yi here. So you are getting, so if it is a covariance along z direction, it will be zi minus z bar, right? So basically, suppose if it is, what will be the covariance of xx? Covariance of x is simply the covariance of x along that with itself, right? So here covariance of x is with respect to y. How does like one data in one dimension varies with the variance in the other dimension? Relative to that, it's in relative terms. But if somebody says that we are calculating covariance of xx, it essentially means that we are calculating the covariance of along the x dimension with respect to itself. So essentially it is the variance along that one particular dimension, right? So can you also say that covariance of xy will be equal to or not equal to yx? Any comments? I think it's very evident, right? So whether you have x first or y first does not make any difference, right? So if you say covariance of xy should be equal to covariance of yx also, right? The thing is, because the reason why I'm telling this is because just to make you understand exactly what principal component analysis is, because you need to understand what is covariance first, because everything will be operated on this covariance matrix to get that principal component. So is it understood the properties of covariance? So suppose there is a data in three dimensions, x, y, and z. How many covariance can be calculated for this data in three different dimensions? Okay, you can calculate covariance along for xy, xz, yz, right? So as a general rule, what is there? If you have data in n dimensions, you will have n factorial upon n minus 2 into 2 covariances that you can calculate. So the general way of how you put the covariances, you put them in a matrix. So suppose you have three-dimensional data, essentially what the matrix will look like xyz, xyz. The matrix will look like covariance of xx, covariance of xy, covariance of xz, covariance of yx, so forth and so on, which is shown here. Did you understand how why do we make this matrix of covariance? Because if the data is in like a multi-dimensional data, you can calculate n factorial upon n minus 2 factorial into 2 covariances for that that many number of dimensions. And the convenient way of representing data is in the form of matrix, which is being shown like this. Is it making sense so far? I think just basic things, but it is very important, to understand what principal component theory of principal component analysis is. Okay, so once you have this covariance matrix, the next thing is to come to the aim is to derive the principal component of your data set. And why you need to develop a principal component? Because you have multidimensional data which you cannot just plot on a piece of paper to visualize things like what is going on in there, right? So to derive some information out of that data, you need that principal component. So in order to obtain that principal components, general way of going about is you should know this basic mathematics that works behind, So there are various software tools that will give you the principal components, give you score and loading plots clearly. But if you understand the mathematics and statistics behind how principal components are derived, it will be more useful in that sense. That's why I'm just going through the basics of this thing. So once you have this covariance matrix, next thing you have to identify the eigenvectors and eigenvalues. So eigenvectors and eigenvalues, the concept is, suppose you have this see this multiplication of this particular matrix with a vector. So this is a vector and this is a matrix, and when this multiplied by this, so this particular the output vector is basically not an a multiple or anything of the input vector, right? So this is basically a non-eigenvector. But suppose in this case, this vector when is multiplied, the output vector is just 4 times the input vector. So this kind of vector is called eigenvectors. So this is just an example. I am not going into the exact mathematics. Just for your example, I'm just saying that what is eigenvectors. So basically it should be multiple of this thing. But so one thing is, what you can see is the matrix which is used to multiply is basically can be called as a transformation matrix, which when multiplied by a vector, and if it gives a multiple of the vector that we started with or initial vector, then you say that for that particular matrix you have an eigenvector. So generally, and if you look at the structure of this matrix, it is a square matrix, right? So generally eigenvectors can be obtained only for square matrices. So if you have any other kind of matrix, if you have covariance matrix other than the square matrix, you will not be able to get an eigenvector for that. Okay, so that is one point. It should you get eigenvectors only for square matrices. The second thing is the matrix, the eigenvectors are always perpendicular to each other. So this is very important, because when we see the application of how the principal component analysis helps you to visualize things, that thing will become very clear. So the principal components are perpendicular to each other. And the third property of eigenvectors is that if you scale a vector, for example, I scale this vector by just a multiple of 2, and then use that scale vector to multiply it with the transformation matrix or the covariance matrix, for example, you will again end up getting the same vector, which is the same times the multiple of the same the quantity or the magnitude of that is same as that of unscaled vector. So that is another property. So essentially, if you scale, because just by scaling the vector by any amount, it's only increasing the length of that vector. It is not changing the direction. So that's why it does not matter at all whether you scale the vector or not, right? So these are the 3 different properties of eigenvectors. And once you have this, the eigenvectors, the another thing is, this is thing that you should understand about eigenvectors. And then the other thing that you should know is eigenvalue. So if you see in these two cases, for the unscaled one, the magnitude with which the resultant vector after transformation or multiplication with the this transformation matrix was 4, and here also even after scaling the magnitude is 4. So basically this this quantity is called eigenvalue of this eigenvector. Okay, so eigenvectors and eigenvalues always come in pairs. For a given eigenvector, you will always have a particular eigenvalue. So they all come in pairs. So with this background, let us now go into understanding about how you apply all this understanding to derive the principal component of a data set. So the definition of a PCA is a maximum variance projection method. Okay, so is a maximum variance projection method or dimensionality reduction algorithm. So basically, as I think you could be able to appreciate this, that we started with a large dimensional data set, which we are not able to visualize or analyze simply on a piece of paper by plotting. So what we need is we need to reduce the dimensionality of the data set without losing the information, any important information in that data set, and then get the information about the patterns in the data set, similarities or differences, what are there, any outliers are there or not. All those, depending upon the question that you're asking, you can identify whatever you're being asked to do. So how you're going to reduce the dimensionality and how you make the maximum variance projection on this data set of if you have a data set, how you're projecting that data set onto a plane, or such that you have maximum variance of the data set along that particular direction. So that is what principal component is. And if you see the steps in PCA, so initially you will get some data, you make some measurements. Like we said, you can use spectroscopic tools, you could use chromatography tools, or any other data generating thing that you have. You will get that data, or even the data could manually you could not be able to get multivariate data like that, but generally you need some tools to get that large amount of data. So once you have that data, the second step is you basically subtract the mean of each dimension. So for each variable, each variable will be representing one particular dimension of the data set, right? So for each variable and each dimension, you will take the mean and subtract each of the components of that dimension with this mean. We'll see how that is done. And then from that subtracted data set, basically you then calculate the covariance matrix, because then it will help you to understand how the data is spread, or you will be able to get the idea of variance in the data set. And once you have the variance covariance matrix calculated, you will use that covariance matrix to identify whether you have an eigenvector or eigenvector for that particular covariance matrix. Like I said, eigenvectors can be only obtained for square matrices, and not all square matrices have the eigenvectors. If you see this particular example, this is also a square matrix, but this does not have an eigenvector here. So not all square matrices will have eigenvectors, but you need to find out whether for your covariance matrix that from your data, whether you're able to calculate eigenvector and eigenvalues for that. So if you have an eigenvector, you will always get the eigenvalue, because both of them come in pairs. And once you calculate eigenvectors and eigenvalues, the next step is you form a feature vector. And here is where the dimensionality reduction or the dimensionality reduction actually happens. Okay, and then once you have that reduced dimensionality, reduced data in the reduced dimensional form, you then use them to analyze your trends in your data using the new data set that you get. So we'll see how what does each of the step mean now with some example. So I've taken very simple example here of two data set X and Y. So this is some measurements of X and some measurements of Y. So as we said that suppose you have collected the data set, the first step is you calculate the mean along each dimension. For example, you will take mean of the x dimension and mean along the y dimension. Okay. So for here the mean is like 1.81 and 1.91. And what you're going to do is you're going to subtract the mean with each of these values in this dimension. So 2.5 minus 1.8, like that, so on and so forth, it will go. And similarly, you will get the data set for y dimension. So essentially, what you try to do is you did a mean centering. So essentially, the new data set will have zero mean. Can you imagine that? So once you have subtracted with the mean of this, the new data set will be shifted in your scatter plot such that this transformed or data adjusted will have zero mean for along each dimension. Is it understood? I could repeat it again if you want. It's a very simple exercise that we do here. Just take the mean along each dimension and then subtract with each entity in that particular dimension with the mean, and then the data set that you get, finally you will have a mean centered data set, where actually what the meaning of mean centered is, you are getting the new data set that is derived after subtracting the mean will have like zero mean, because you already subtracted with the mean value, right? Is it okay?
Yes, sir, it's okay, sir.
Yeah. So once you have this mean centered data, the next thing is you calculate the covariance matrix. So suppose you have like two-dimensional data. So how many covariances values you can calculate with the, or what will be the size of the matrix of a covariance matrix for this two-dimensional data? We discussed this. You remember that formula, right? N factorial by n minus 2 factorial into 2. So you will have like 2 by 2 matrix. So basically I'm not showing like how covariance, because we already showed the formula. So I just after the calculation what is the covariance matrix, we get this covariance matrix. So one important thing so this covariance matrix, if you see, the important thing about this is not the values of this covariance matrix, but the signs of the individual values in this matrix. For example, if you see, the sign is basically along the diagonal, if you see, the sign is basically positive, right? So if both the they have positive sign, essentially means that with the increase in x, the y will also increase. So from this you will get to know some trend about how the two-way data in the two different dimensions vary with respect to each other. And suppose the data is like negative, then essentially with the increase of x variable, the y variable will decrease. So that is what we get from the covariance matrix. The magnitude is not very important here. The sign of the covariance values along each dimension is very important. Okay. So that was the thing. Then once you have the covariance matrix, the next step is that using that covariance matrix, you need to calculate the eigenvectors and eigenvalues of the covariance matrix. So eigenvectors, this is what the eigenvectors, the calculated eigenvectors are. So if you see the eigenvectors here, the one feature of eigenvector is that the length of this eigenvectors is unity. So how do you calculate like a length of an eigenvector? So suppose 3, 2 is the eigenvector. How do you calculate the length of this vector? is just you 3 square plus 2 square will give you the length of the eigenvector. Similarly, for this matrix, you can calculate the eigenvector, and if you calculate the length of eigenvectors, unity. And this is very important step. Suppose if you do not get an eigenvector with unit eigenvector, essentially what will happen is that the variables in your data set that has large values, numerical values, will dominate in the model, even though they may not have that much impact on the overall process. The reason is because if you remember from the definition of PCA, it is maximum variance projection method. So any variable with variance, with a larger numerical value will have larger variance because it will be far away from your mean in the data set. And that particular variable will then, if it is not scaled, to unity, because like I said, vectors, if you scale the vectors, it is not going to impact the output of how the vector will change. That is an implication here of what we discussed before. So scale, because unless you change the direction of the vector, the vector will remain same. Just it's the length that is going to change. So for the eigenvectors, the idea is the length should be unity, and that will basically, normalize any differences in the values. For example, someone, is somebody's weight is like 50 kgs, and in that particular data set, somebody's weight is like 120, or maybe like for any data set, one numerical value is 50 and other numerical value is maybe 1000. So that 1000 value will always dominate the model because it will have the maximum variance. And when we are projecting this onto plane, because that is what PCA does, the variance of that particular variable will be maximized, and therefore it will dominate the model. So in order to prevent that, you have to basically scale the eigenvector to unity. So if in a calculation, if that is not done, so for example, if you have calculated this eigenvector here, in this case, you have got an eigenvector like 6,4, or 6,4, basically, then you take the length of this eigenvector, like root of 6 square plus 4 square, and then divide it with individual values. Then that will become a eigenvector of unit eigenvector, or vector with unit length. I think that is clear, right?
It's okay, sir.
Yeah. So with this, and similarly, if you see the other thing is this eigenvalues. For, like I said, if you have an eigenvector for any covariance matrix, you will always have the eigenvalues for that. So if you see here, one eigenvalue is large and other eigenvalue is small. So we'll discuss this impact of this in our next step. So basically, whatever we did, we have the data set, we subtracted the mean from the data, and then we calculated the covariance matrix. Once we calculated the covariance matrix, then we looked for the eigenvectors for that covariance matrix. Remember, not all covariance matrix will have the eigenvectors. So for a given covariance matrix, if there is an eigenvector, then using that eigenvector, you will be able to, the eigenvectors, one thing is, the subtraction is very necessary, mean centering is very necessary, and then scaling is very necessary to unit variance, right? And that is done by just, dividing your eigenvectors with the length of that vector, so that the total actual length of that vector becomes unity. And then you have eigenvalues for each of them. So if you see here, this is what the plotted data is. This is, along X and Y data set, along X and Y dimensions. If you see the data plots here on the left, you have mostly the data that is without mean centering, and on the right, the data that have mean centered. One thing that you can easily observe is as the data, in the X dimension increases, the data in Y dimension also increases. There's a strong correlation between X and Y data, which is what we also got from this covariance matrix also, right? Because they are positive, the signs of the covariance matrix along the two dimensions are positive. which essentially means that if the one variable in one dimension increases, the other variable in another dimension will also increase. So that is evident from the covariance matrix. Then on this top of the data, there's overlaid this eigenvectors. So whatever eigenvector that we calculated, I just tried to overlay here on the top of the data set. And as you could see, the two eigenvectors are perpendicular to each other, which we discuss as the property of eigenvector. And the second thing is, if you look at this eigenvector carefully, you could see one of the eigenvector is clearly passing through the midpoint of the data set here, right? Which is something like a curve fitting, where you try to fit a curve, data points with some best fit curve, right? So the one of the eigenvectors is exactly passing through data points, and this eigenvector, is basically describing maximum variance. So most of the data points will fall along this eigenvector. Essentially, what you have done by calculating eigenvectors, you have found a line which basically describe your data, describe the variability in your data set to the maximum point. That is what was maximum variance projection method for PCA. The other, other eigenvector, although it is some data points are falling across this, but they are far away from it, and it is not very strong correlation. So this particular eigenvector will not describe much variance in the data set. So suppose if you have like n dimensions, like 10 or 20 dimension data set, and you found out like, how many dimensions. So the number of eigenvectors that can be calculated for any n dimension is, for n dimension, you can have n eigenvectors. So if you have 20 dimensional data, you can get 20 eigenvectors. And depending upon the idea is there, you have to find out the eigenvector with that describes the maximum variation in the data set, which will be 1 or 2 or 3 for most of the data sets. It could be more than that also, but generally it is less than, and you can safely ignore other eigenvectors. If you ignore others, you lose some information, but that information is not significant enough that it will impact the correct interpretation of your process or data that you have. Is it clear?
It's okay, sir. Please continue.
Yeah. So, so another thing that I said was like eigenvalues that you calculate. So if you see this eigenvalues, one of the eigenvalues is very large as compared to other eigenvalues. So essentially the next step, but after calculating eigenvector and eigenvalue is we said that we will form a feature vector. So feature vector is nothing but once you have eigenvectors for your covariance matrix of your data, what you'll try to do is you sort that eigenvectors in increasing order of their values. So the eigenvector with highest eigenvalue will become the principal component, which is basically this line. So this particular eigenvector, has the maximum eigenvalue, and this will become the principal component, because the principal component is the one that describe maximum variation or maximum variance in the data set. So either you're projecting the maximum variance along that particular line, or other ways what you're trying to do is you are choosing only certain eigenvectors that is describing a majority of your variance in the data set. So you're trimming other eigenvectors, or removing other eigenvectors. So essentially you're reducing the dimensionality of the data set. So the feature word is nothing but, feature vector is nothing but as a fancy word for the matrix of eigenvectors of whatever you have chosen. So suppose you started with n dimensional data set, and you got for n dimensional data set, if the covariance matrix has an eigenvector, then you will have like n eigenvectors. But of the n eigenvectors, after sorting, you found that only 3 of them is basically describing majority or 90-95% of variation in the data set. Then essentially what you do is you start working only with the 3 eigenvectors, and feature vector is nothing but that vector of all those 3 eigenvectors, which is arranged in the column form. So this is what feature vector is. So for our data set, since we had only 2 dimension data set, so either you could use both the eigenvectors for analysis, or you could, carefully ignore the second dimensional data set because the eigenvalue was very small for this one. Since the eigenvalue was very small for this one, it will not, describe much variation in the data set, and therefore you can easily ignore without losing an information data set. So this can be applied for any dimensional data set. So essentially you will get your, your reduce the dimensionality of your data set, and finally you can get your, you'll be able to develop plots that will help you to diagnose your process, help you identify outliers and all, any research question that you're asking. So once you have developed this principal component, of your data set, you get various outputs, so those, some of the characteristic outputs of PCR is called score plot, loading plot, the t-square, Hotelling square, and variance explained, etc. So what is score plot? Like I said in before, that score plot is nothing but the how different observations are related to each other, right? So it is just, about one block of data, that how that for different observations are related without regard to other dimension, right? So that is what about the score plot is. The loading plot is when you project different variables onto the principal component, how much those variables are contributing to the principal component value. That is what is called loading. So loading will basically give you information about, the how different variables correlate. So whatever observation that you make in the score plot, you get idea about how different observations are related to each other. What is the data structure? To explain that score plot, basically you keep the loading plot side by side that, and basically you try to overlay the score plot and loading plot to see how different variables are situated vis-a-vis the different observation in the score plot. And based on that, you could be able to interpret or provide explanation of possible reasons why you have a particular clustering, or why you have certain grouping, why there's something outlier in the data, etc. The Hotelling t-square is basically a statistical term that is basically shows an eclipse. So whenever you have a score plot, you will see an eclipse here, right? So here there's an eclipse. This is called t-square Hotelling sphere eclipse. So basically any observation that lies outside this t-square Hotelling eclipse is considered as an outlier in the data. That is how you get the outliers in the data. We're not going to mathematics of how t-square Hotelling is obtained. So this is how principal component analysis is done, and that is what we get. So another very important thing, matter of caution that one have to take is that, so whenever you have a data set, you have to take the entire data set together. You cannot cherry pick some data, because suppose you have 20 variables, not all the 20 variables will exert its impact on your process outcome individually. They may have some certain interaction between variables, so they are always correlated variable together. So essentially PCA takes input in the form of correlated variables and spits out a model where you have a principal component that are uncorrelated, because one eigenvector and other eigenvector are perpendicular to each other, which means that the information contained in one is kind of orthogonal to what is information contained in the other eigenvector, right? So that is one thing. You cannot cherry pick between data sets. So whatever data that you have collected, even some small data points, like we saw that example that two variables, even though they were between the control limits, but when we looked the correlation pattern, they came out as outliers. And those outliers may have a profound impact on the performance of the process. You have to early on identify those outliers. So if you trim your data and you just cherry pick data that suits you, then that is not something that this is a common practice, that people say that we have a noise in data. So if there is a missing data, then you have to model that data. That is how the MVD is done. So we are not going into those details, but the idea is, the message is that you have to use the entire data set, whatever you have collected. Don't cherry pick any of the data set. The second consideration is most of your variables, and the reason why you have to consider all the data set is because you have the they are multicollinear with each other. There's a relationship between different variables that they act in, there's some interaction between variables that impact the process. So basically you take correlated data and the PCA model will spit out the uncorrelated principal components for you, which will make it easier for you to make sense of your data or question that you're trying to answer. The second important thing is correlation and causation. So just this, with this plot, I just wanted to quickly explain this, that suppose this is the number of strokes that happen in a particular country and the population in that particular country over the years. So what is showing is that over the years, as the number of strokes increased, there is a very strong correlation with the increase in population. But do you think that that could be a reason for this? So this is a correlation, but this is not a causation. So general pitfall in doing a multivariate data analysis is that people just take correlation as a causation. That is not the true. So there will be some other variable that may have an interaction with these two variables that may have led to this kind of correlation, but it is not causation. So we have to be very careful when we do interpretations of this kind of plots, because you may get very strong relationship between them, but you cannot say that this kind of observation or this kind of trend is attributed to the variables that for which that relationship is being held true. Any questions? If is there, I'd like to take a pause and answer that. No? So I can continue then. So with this, no, I will just, because we have like another half an hour. So what I'll try to do is give you an case study of how this techniques of MVDA is used for root cause analysis for a particular biotech process. So this in biotech process, generally we do cell culture a lot, and cell culture is a way where you use certain organisms, maybe some microbes, some mammalian systems, maybe bacteria, viruses, or even some plants are also used. Insects are also used to, help in the production of a particular product using those expression systems. So cell culture technology is one of the key steps where that are the workhorses for producing your product of interest. So this is the case study where what was done was a scale up of process was done from a lab scale, which was 2 liter bioreactor cell culture technique to 2000 liter reaction, right? So what we saw was that all the attributes, between the 2 liter and 2000 liter quality attributes of the product were within the expected range. All the process attributes that we were, that were having impact on the cell culture process were also within expected range, and the process was very well characterized, but when they transfer the technology tech transfer was happening, and from the pilot to a commercial scale, like from 2 liter to 2000 liter, there were some issues that surfaced up or that came up, so, and the reason was one of the critical quality attributes was outside acceptable range, and this was basically attributed to the metabolic profile of of the cells at the 2 different scales. So how this was identified very early on during tech transfer, and that actually helped in facilitating the technology transfer, was adopting this techniques of MVDA to this data set that were collected at like 2 liter and 2000 liter scale. So basically the data were from 2 different runs from different batches, like of a 2 liter batch, and there was like 2000 pilot scale run, and we had like the N was about 14 in case of 2 liter and 11 for the 2000 liter pilot scale, and this was the different parameters. the different parameters that were monitored were the viable cell density, the time of cell culture, osmolarity, pH, partial pressure of carbon dioxide, oxygen, glucose, lactate, all these metabolites were there. And of course, the titer and purity were also monitored. So this is the score plot of, of the different batches at 2 liter and 2000 liter. So what one could see is, you can see evolution of batches as a function of time in this. So the initial batches, start is represented in the blue. Then you have the green batches, which is in like lying in the second and third quadrant. And then you have some yellow batches in third quadrant and red batches in the fourth quadrant. And if you see the same batches which were then acquired at the 2000 liter scale, you could see the evolution more or less similar, right? The similar performance, except for few changes. The evolution is like the quadrant, the respective quadrants in which batches lie, they're almost similar. So basically, with this, you will get some kind of fingerprint of the process, and how the process is evolving over the time. You can get some information from it. So looking at the score plot, generally it seems that there is not much changes, but there's some slight differences, but not significant differences in the evolution of the batches in the two scales. No, so basically with the application of this, like I said, for the PAT thing that we discussed before beginning this talk today. So PAT is one of the areas that enables to get the product quality during the process itself. And this could be an enabling tool, because if you're able to get this kind of real-time plots for your process, you will be able to identify any abnormalities, stop the process at that particular point and do the corrective measures and come back, and so that at the end of you don't have to discard or the batch as a whole, right? So that will save time, cost, everything for the manufacturer, right? So even for this kind of thing where you have the scale up, you can also do comparability studies like this. So the loading plot, as we said, the loading plot basically gives you the relationship between the variables, right? So now we have this two different loading plots at 2 liter and 2000 liter scale. And essentially what you could see is the various parameters like, the glucose, pH, oxygen and carbon dioxide, they are most similar in the two scale, except for a few differences. The major difference that you see is in terms of osmolarity, ammonia and lactate level, right? Which is very much different. So essentially the reason why this is very different is very much evident, because when you have, at larger process scales, the gas transfer generally is very inefficient. And when the gas transfer is inefficient, generally what happens is that all this metabolite in the control with which you're controlling the process, and so there is a defined set point for the pH, and therefore in order to maintain that pH, more bases will be used, and that's why the more ammonia will be used at a higher lab scale. So this is basically you're able to identify what parameter is being constrained when you do the tech transfer from from a lab scale to a pilot scale. And based on that, you can always go back and do the corrective. You can work on this gas transfer at the higher scale, and based on that you will be able to do successful tech transfer there. So another thing is variable importance projection plot. So it is nothing but just the importance of different variables during different processes. So that is given one of the diagnostic tool that plot that you get after you do the PCA. So essentially what you said, see here is the titer, VCD and viability. They have profound the cell culture process have profound impact on this parameter, because they are basically the output parameters, whereas pH, glucose, lactate, etc., they are the input parameters. So generally these input parameters, will have impact, the cell culture will have impact on them, whereas for these parameters will impact the cell culture processes. So whereas this is the different ranking of different parameter variables in order of their impact on the process, versus when you look at the 2000 liter scale, you have almost the similar thing, except for changes in the pH, which we saw in our loading plot also, because we discussed that at higher
scale, generally the gas transfer is very inefficient, and therefore, you have to maintain the pH for the survival of the host or host cell, so that the product is produced at optimum yields. So that is how this plot can help you to confirm like what are the issues when you do a scale up. So with that, I like to stop here and just give a summary that the multivariate analysis, there are many other case studies, like we can use these case studies to develop relationship between the input parameters and output parameters. Like I said, that glycosylation, like sugars are added to protein molecules, and a very important parameter, and it impacts the time that the protein drug will spend in our body. It will impact the efficacy, it will impact the safety of the patient, because all the side effects will happen because of this interaction of the sugar residues with proteins or other ligands that is present in the patient. So in those cases, generally we use PLS model, but what we discussed was PCA today. So I just restricted my case study to the the scale up example, but there are many other examples that you could do. You could do process variability at different scales. You could do fault diagnosis and root cause investigations can be done. You could also do simple process monitoring and how the trends are changing in the process. And based on the changing trends, if there is some fault in the process, you can find out that at a very early stage, and therefore, do corrective measures to bring the process back to the normal limits, so that ultimately you end up getting the product of your desired quality. Overall, all this, tools help you to enhance your process understanding, reduce the time that you spend in developing a product and process. It cut short on the losses that incurs because of failed batches, etc. So there are multiple benefits of adopting this, and this is very much used in this like other fields, but in biotech process it's a very new application that is happening, because earlier people just used to do this bivariate analysis and univariate analysis, but now with the multivariate analysis, things are getting speed up and it is being adopted. And many drugs that have been submitted for approval to FDA, they have this MVDA data as a process control charts have been developed for this to demonstrate the comparability or the robustness of the scale up process, etc. So with that, I'll like to acknowledge this my authors on this particular case study that I presented here, and my previous lab where I have worked, and current group members here at IIT BHU. With that, I'd like to stop and like kind of take any questions that you may have. I think we finished up well before the time.
Thank you very much, sir, for such an informative session. So now I would like to know from the participants, if you have any question to be asked, please ask your question to Dr. Sumit Kumar Singh. Or in fact, you can write in the chat box also.
Yeah. No questions.
So since there is no question from the audience, so with your permission, I mean to say in this session.
Okay.
But before this, we have a certificate of appreciation for you. So just a small token of appreciation from our end.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, sir. And in the future, we'll also meet with you maybe in a next or in our next FDP.
Sure. It was a great pleasure talking with you. So in case if you have any doubts which you don't, you're not asking now, you can just, write an email to me. I'll be happy to, get back to you with the answers.
So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
So thank you all participants. If you haven't filled up the attendance link and feedback form, just do it now. because the link will remain active till 4 p.m. So thank you all participants.